Hello and welcome to this week's Countryside podcast brought to you by NFU Mutual. And I'm going to be finding out from DEFA Minister Richard Ronan, John, about, I suppose controversial in some people's eyes and ears about the price rises at the Isle of Man meat plant, first of all.
They are the charges being made by the government on the tenants of the meat plant, Manx Meats, of course, in running it. It's absolutely essential to the farming industry on the Isle of Man. And I'd also often make the point when we're talking like this, it's essential also to the Manx public. If we want fresh Manx meat on the Isle of Man, then we're going to have an abattoir, an operative abattoir. And the charges have got to be such as, I'm getting political now, charges have got to be such as we can deal with.
Yeah, of course, the other thing was the Countryside Care Scheme, which used to be part of the Isle of Man, involving grants and things like that, wasn't it? Just to explain more.
It's still evolving, Simon. I think they said at the time it would take time to settle in, and so it has.
Yeah, and of course it's changed its name now to the Agricultural Development Scheme, and one of the things that was brought up originally during the changeover was defining who was actually farming their land and who was just sitting on it. So I'm going to ask DEFA Minister Richard Ronan just to explain more about how they're describing or categorising an active farmer. You've been fairly active.
I can't help but smile, Simon. If you could see my hands and see what's written on our calendar at home and where the cow tags are and what's in the back of my truck and what we've got ahead of us this next week, they would have a very clear definition of an active farmer. But it is one that does need to be defined politically and sort of, quite scientifically, in fact, because they need to establish now who is eligible to claim on the Agricultural Development Scheme.
And of course you've found a little bit of time for some recreation in the ever-growing popular forests of the Isle of Man.
Yeah, we stumbled on this one, Simon. And you've heard me tell many, many times. We do a Saturday night walk loosely attached to St John's Chapel. 2025 was set off, with one man leading us, and he's very, very good. But he took us through our Challigan plantation to find the secret lake. Fancy, just a few miles from where I live, a place I'd never been before. And when we saw it, it was absolutely amazing. It's worth going up to see what was there. And if you do, try the wobble walk, because I successfully negotiated that.
Oh, did you?
I was chuffed.
Did anyone get a wet foot?
Not that I know of. I didn't.
Fair enough then. All right, we'll sit back and listen to this week's Countryside.
Well, it was during a Saturday night walk with our walking group that we discovered what was going on in the middle of our Challigan plantation. We discovered for the first time the secret lake and all the furniture that's around it now to make it so accessible and so enjoyable, not only for adults but for families indeed. And I went to talk to the lady who was heavily involved in the distribution of all the amenities around there, Kate Evans. She's the chairperson of the End-to-End Legacy. I asked Kate, how did she get involved in this project?
Well, I head up the End-to-End Legacy Committee, which is responsible for the developments in Art Challigan. We've obviously done the lake development this year, and last year we did the junior race course and the play area and trim trail.
The end-to-end is the cycle race from the end of one end of the island to the other.
Yes.
Using places like Art Challigan. So how on earth did you marry then the end-to-end operation and this super amenity that now appears in the middle of Art Challigan?
Well, it's all funding, really. We obviously have a fantastic event in the end-to-end mountain bike race. But previously, nothing has ever really come of that. There's been no feedback into the community as a result. It was a not-profit making event, whereas now we changed it around a couple of years ago, and now any profits that we do make are fed straight back into the charity, which is the Legacy Charity. And from that has the ethos of helping support community developments. So Art Challigan is our development, but we do support other ones as well.
Obviously, the end-to-end has gone through Art Challigan before. It hasn't gone through.
No.
How did you find Art Challigan then?
Well, we're all keen cyclists, so Art Challigan is where I walk the dogs about 3 times a week. But we all cycle in there. There's loads of trails in Art Challigan for mountain bikers.
Now, tell us a little bit more about the lake development.
We did this with the support of Zurich International, who supported us last year as well. So last year we did the junior raceway in Art Challigan and the trim trail and the playground. The guys came back this year with 140 of their staff and some money, which was great. And we all did the lake development.
Nobody ever knew there was a lake in the middle of Ardchalligan.
Very few, yeah, very few. It was always known as the secret lake, the hidden lake. A lot of people knew roughly that it was there, could never find it. It is the most beautiful spot. You know, if you're there, particularly 6 o'clock in the morning, walking the dogs, you know, on a beautiful summer's morning, it's just heaven, absolute heaven. And the wildlife around there is fantastic. So we just wanted people to enjoy what we enjoy.
And it is in the middle of the plantation, isn't it? You can't see anything else but the lake.
Oh no, it is beautiful. It's sort of down onto the end of it. You need to go down into the bottom car park or walk around. But yeah, now we've opened up the access.
Now, you say that you've opened it up, but actually the lake opens up before you as you follow the path, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. The access was always very difficult because it goes across a bog water land, which previously you had to wade through. But in doing so, you damage the plant life down there, which is actually quite special.
Now, around the lakes as well, there's quite a few facilities. There are tables and seats where you could just take your leisure.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's designed to be a family area. You know, we want children to learn about the animals that are around there, both around the outside of the lake and in it. So we are putting some pond dipping equipment out there shortly so the children can get their feet wet. There's beautiful dragonflies, moths, birds, lots of animals to learn about, and there are some information boards there. But also we cleared some areas. There's about 6 picnic tables down there. It's a beautiful place to sit and have a picnic. But also we've built some children's play areas. There's hides to explore. There's
we'll come to that in a minute,
trails.
because
There's lots out there.
We walked round the lake, and it's obvious that there's going to be a lot of wildlife there because it is completely undisturbed, isn't it?
It is, and that is the main thing that people need to remember. It is an area. It's not technically protected, but DEFRA would like us to consider it as being protected.
Do you think there is a danger then, if it becomes too popular, that we may lose some of the mystique, some of the protection that the wildlife enjoy?
Well, we have tried to cater for that. We've tried to keep the public to certain specific areas. We have worked with the DEFRA Biodiversity Officer with regard to this, and they're happy that we have kept the public to specific areas, and other areas will remain untouched. They predominantly are the feeding areas for the invertebrates and the wildlife there.
After you leave the lake and you wend your way back out looking for the car park, which now is signposted, thankfully, you come on all the play areas that you've created. Tell us a little bit about them.
Well, you know, children need to be entertained. I have 2 children. They're a lot older now, but I remember the days when, you know, you have children of different ages and they like doing different things. So we try to cater for that. You know, there are balance beams, wobble boards, all that sort of thing. We try to use the natural wood that's there and keep everything as naturalised as possible.
The wigwams round the bottom of the trees with ordinary branches just picked up off the ground.
Oh yeah, absolutely. When, you know, the guys from Zurich had a great time building those, and some of them will definitely be there for an awful long time. You know, they're as strong as anything. From last year, we learnt from the interaction with the Children's Centre that the best way to stimulate a child is to not tell it how to play. And so we try to incorporate that learning going forward as well. So yes, we have given them wobble walks and things like that, but we've not given them a set path through it. We've given them things that roll and tip, and we've given them hides, so they can really choose how they want.
So DEFRA were quite happy that you should develop it like this as an amenity area.
Yes, they were. They have a strong ethos these days to try and get the community into the woodlands and to use them as community forest areas. And Ardchalligan really fits the bill on that. It's relatively level, and so and it has a very good access track all the way around the outside. Mums with tots with buggies, they can get down there. Dog walkers are welcome, horse riders are welcome, cyclists are welcome. You know, it really is a community area.
You said, Kate, that you were part of the end-to-end cycle race, and the funding for this actually came from that operation.
Yes, that's exactly right. So for the last 2 years and going forwards, all profits that are made from the End-to-End Mountain Bike Challenge, which is sponsored by Manx Telecom for us, which is great, they go directly to the Legacy Project.
It's a very generous gesture, though, to provide a facility then for all and sundry in the island.
There's a little bit of angle for it as well. We are trying to encourage people to get out into the forests and take up mountain biking as well. So that obviously feeds us, and the Manx Mountain Bike Club that actually owns the End-to-End end, and they support us absolutely wholeheartedly with the legacy. They just say, well, so long as there's always something there for mountain bikers, that suits us. So that's great.
And what are the prospects?
With the interaction with Zurich International, they have just been great. We've now had 2 years where they've given us, I think this year it was 140 staff for, over a course of a week.
And the end-to-end itself, plenty of entries?
Well, we're a little bit down actually on entries just at the moment. So come on, guys, get your pedals on and get entered. It is obviously for a good cause now, and I think that really, people need to really realise that the funds do come back into the island.
Kate Evans, very, very enthusiastic about the work they're doing in Archelagan. It's going to make Archelagan very, very available to and accessible to all and sundry. Adults and children alike, Simon.
Yes, it's wonderful that they're trying to do something to encourage people, young and old, to be outside in the countryside.
Well, you see, the Forestry Board, and I remember a lot of the plantations actually being planted, and that use seems to have sort of been overtaken now by the leisure time that people have got. South Barrule is another one, the Ape Man at South Barrule, which is a very, very popular young people's park now. So very, very positive and very, very good.
It's funny that we say about finding time. I think people could find time, couldn't they? But they're just so used to having their own. They need to watch Coronation Street, some of them, Top Gear. I'm not discriminating.
You and I know how to find time, Simon.
Yes. Well, over recent weeks, there has come to light some changes that are in place for the Isle of Man meat plant. To tell me more in detail about it was the Minister for DEFA, Richard Ronan.
Yes, we're bringing an order to July Tynwald in respects to the charging regime mechanism regarding the meat graders, the veterinary service that's provided by DEFA. We're bringing in what we feel is a fairer charge to be levied against the meat plant itself, because quite clearly, after looking at the figures to this, that there are, I believe, large inefficiencies at the meat plant in respects to the cost. The cost at the minute is approximately £2 per beast, which is getting charged. The real cost, which is I suppose the subsidy, is £11, and the UK average is £4. What we're trying to do is to bring in a fair and ease a system in over 3 years, where we believe that the meat plant can bring better efficiencies to bring the cost down. One thing we have to say on this, and I know there has been a little bit of disquiet in the farming community, is that an extra charge to farmers. This is not the case, and this is absolutely not the reason for doing this. This is about creating more efficiencies at the meat plant, which I believe ultimately, and I've had many conversations about this and said it on the floor of Tynwald, is about creating equivalency for meat prices to the UK, which is ultimately, as I said in Keys this week, is the holy grail for the farming community. So this isn't absolutely about passing charges on to the farmers, and I definitely do not want to see that.
Why is there such a big difference in the cost, for running it compared to the UK, the £11 where it was and the £4?
Yeah, I believe purely it's down to inefficiencies, and this is not a slant at the current regime at the meat plant. I just believe this is just the way it was done. It was a service provided. It wasn't even on the profit and loss sheet. So as a business, they weren't seeing the figure. So why would they worry about it? What we want to do is highlight this figure, and it's pretty clear to date that the meat plant over the last few years is making big changes, is making proper decisions, I believe, in creating better efficiencies, better working practices, and ultimately saving money, which creates a better environment and hopefully further down the line creates better prices for the farmer.
This perception you spoke about as well, and people get this perception as well that the actual DEFA run the meat plant, and that's why the prices are going up. It is, just for the people out of agriculture get this sort of perception, don't they?
Yeah, no. Well, the meat plant's run by cooperative, as we know, basically ran by the farming community. We provide a service and we offer a subsidy as well with that. And that subsidy's up for negotiation. I believe it's this year into next year. Correct me if I'm wrong on that one, but it's it is subsidised, and that's what at the end of the day, that's what government's here for, to make sure that that we have a good service on Ireland. Because the last thing we want is more live exports of animals. I know an island well in Orkney which is having major problems, and they're having to ship basically everything off Ireland. That's the last thing we want to do. It's not good for the marketplace over here. We've got to create an environment which it is good for the farming community to put their stock through the meat plant.
People might say that the government are asking too much for the building.
Do you mean it's too big, or?
Well, I think we all know, or sort of people involved in it, I think knew it was maybe a little bit larger than it needed to be to start with. And is that one of the problems? Has anyone looked at sort of maybe changing it and making a smaller one, which is more efficient to run?
It has been talked about that, but having been around the meat plant and having been, may I say, quite impressed by what I've seen, and I came away with a better interpretation before I went in. I believe that the size of the building, certainly not being from the industry, I'm not judged to comment of the right size or not. What I have to say is, if we have this facility now, we have to make best use of it, and we have to make sure that it's ran as efficiently as possible. I would hope further down the line, when hopefully we see numbers pick up and we see more throughput at the meat plant, that it be a blessing in disguise that it's the size it is now. So hopefully in time it will be a good decision. I hope so.
Devon Minister Richard Ronan.
Manx Radio's Countryside is brought to you by NFU Mutual.
Well, we heard earlier in the year about the rebranding of the former Countryside Care Scheme to the Isle of Man Agricultural Development Scheme. One item that was still up for deliberation at that time was an active farmer. Richard Ronan explained more.
This is something I was determined to see through, certainly from when I was appointed minister, and after my discussions with the Industry Advisory Committee, the Farmers Union, farmers themselves, is that they wanted to see a definition of active farmer. If I'm honest with you, Simon, I couldn't believe it wasn't in the first place. Having done this now and gone through this process of active farmer, I understand now why it wasn't. You would think that it was a very easy thing to do, that you have a definition of active farmer and the money goes to the so-called sort of right places in respects to subsidy. And certainly having gone through this and having looked at other jurisdictions who have active farmer, which is the vast majority of Europe, it is a very complex and very difficult thing to define. But one thing is clear with the definition that we in DEFRA, along with our farming community, certainly the Manx Farmers Union, have agreed on this now. This is as tough a definition you will get across Europe. It hasn't had gone without its problems along the way. Certainly when we brought the agriculture development scheme through earlier this year through Tynwald, it was clear late in the day that the active farmer would create a problem for landlords who historically received the payment. What it would do, because we would have brought it straight in, it would have created a problem. And the last thing I wanted to do was to create hardship or uncertainty on anybody. So we give 12 months for them arrangements to be shifted, which basically will mean that the people farming the land now will ultimately get the payment, and ultimately the landlord will charge a market rate for that land. That to me is proper business and how it should be. So I'm hopefully long term nobody will lose out. It'll just be a fairer system, and more importantly will be seeing a better perception by the public. There's also
nothing more annoying the public when the hearsay of the Isle of Man, let's put it, people in the know what's going on. People just outside the cusp of agriculture and places think that they just get this perception that people are just getting money from the government for absolutely nothing.
I think that could be said about a lot of subsidies and a lot of benefits around the Isle of Man, whatever it's in.
Yeah.
There's always question about this, but I think we have to balance this against our marketplace, whether it be the United Kingdom, whether it be across Europe. This is a subsidised industry which is basically led by after the Second World War. It's spiralled from that. But at the end of the day, countries like New Zealand and places who don't have subsidy, they have a different environment, a different marketplace. They don't have competitors like we have. Now, it's important to realise that if we didn't have a subsidy, we wouldn't have a farming community. What we have to do is to make sure that the value for that money that is distributed, as it is across Europe, is seen to go to the right places and seen to go to the right people and will benefit and grow our economy. I believe the way we're doing this is right. This is absolutely a long journey we're on. I've got a lot of faith and a lot of belief in my short time as Minister for this area of our community and, may I say, economy. Along the journey, we've got to make sure that we make the right decisions. And I believe, although it isn't seen as easy, some people see it as unfair, I believe the general pattern of what we're trying to do in DEFRA is right, and more importantly, right for them.
We can't go through, because you said it's quite a complex thing, that obviously the word, and they can't just say, you're a farmer and you're not, you don't qualify. So people can actually look at the definitions of it, can't they, on the DEFRAs and stuff like that to get the top and bottom of it. But people also get this perception, I think, that possibly the Isle of Man is the only country in the world that gives subsidies to people.
Far from it. And, and I think every farmer I've ever spoken to said, they wish it wasn't that landscape. They wish they didn't have a subsidy, but they have to. It's as simple as that, and I've never said otherwise. And what we have to do is to make sure that like every area of government money, that there's value to it, and we gain public support, which I genuinely believe through this process of what we've done, certainly bringing in the food strategy, changing which I believe was a good scheme in the Countryside Care Scheme. I believe it was the next step in the Agricultural Development Scheme. Is the right message going out to the public.
The Minister for DEFRA, Richard Ronan. Well, it's a lot in the news at the moment about it, isn't it? The changes, and I don't know, it doesn't suit everybody and it suits others, and it's difficult choices, isn't it? And you hear rumours, John. That's the old worst thing about the Isle of Man, isn't it?
It is a difficult time, though, Simon, and I think the uncertainty is the one thing that farmers can't do. They say the money market can't do with uncertainty, but neither can agriculture. You'll know as well as I do, you're brought up in a farming background. We work on a long-term basis and like to have a good idea of what lies ahead as far as we can look at it. But things are changing, and it's difficult to nail things down in the new world of change. Yeah.
Yes, everything's changing, modernising.
It is indeed.
Yeah.
Well, earlier in the programme you heard me talking to Kate Evans, heavily involved in the amenities now in the middle of Archalagan Plantation. The plantations of the Isle of Man have been long established. Some of them have been quite recent, but their role in forestry now is changing. It's changing from producing timber for use on the Isle of Man to access and recreation. The officer involved in that particular aspect is Graham Watson.
My role's in improving access and recreation for the general public to the Department of State. We've got a large area of land, it's 28,000 acres approximately in area. It incorporates hills, forests and glens. We've got some wonderful woodlands to develop and with plenty of potential for it to come about. My role started in 2004, so I've been here for just over 10 years. In that time, the department has shifted away from hardcore forestry operations into more amenity development. And we've seen some significant changes with the help of a team, which has brought about changes at the likes of South Barrule, Conrenny and various other plantations.
And what's the response been like from the public?
Very good. We're finding that many of our plantations are very busy these days. In the past, we had areas which we termed as being sort of timber stacking areas. They're now called car parks. It's because they're needed for the visitors, and we find that many are open to public ramblage. Basically, they're open access for walkers, horse riders, and for cyclists as well.
Now, when you get the public in onto a site that they may not be used to, how do they treat it? Do they generally respect it? Because they are quite sensitive areas, aren't they?
Yes, I mean, the woodlands, we have a lot of coniferous plantations and we have broadleaf glens as well. We have a lot of broadleaf and Armax national glens, of which we have 18. Very good, really. We don't suffer from many problems. I mean, there's always some conflicts of interests, but in general, the public are very respectful of the quality and diversification of land that we have.
What sort of developments are we looking at? Probably the best known ones on South Barrule.
South Barrule is what we see to be our recreational hub, and we've done quite a lot of work on a public-private partnership basis to develop such activities as the Segway, the 8-Man and the Laser Mayhem. And they're doing very well indeed at the moment.
How did you fasten on the ideas? Did you ask for opinions, or did you devise them yourselves, or have you looked at other places that have developed them similarly?
Yes, I mean, if you look to the UK, I mean, the Forestry Commission have been working on a very similar basis for a long time now. We're a little bit behind, but we're catching up at a rapid rate. Go Ape is the equivalent of our 8-Man. They have cycle hire and they have cafes and various other facilities that go with it. So we are following a sort of a trend that's in the UK, but it is going very well at the moment.
Are we going to see this develop further?
Yes, we hope so. I mean, we're working very closely with the corporate and third sectors. What we would like to see is a series of community woodlands across the Isle of Man. Conrenny is somewhere where we've been working with a number of groups to develop new footpaths, ponds, trim trails and so forth. And Archalagan is another one, South Brule being a third site. We've got a lot of thank yous to give, and obviously Zurich International Life and the End-to-End Legacy are one of them, or two of them should I say. But there's the likes of the Community Impact Team who work with long-term unemployed to get them back into some form of regular tasks and teamwork, and community services order programme, and a lot of volunteers who put hours and hours of effort into developing mountain bike trails and other types of access improvements.
I could well imagine that work in such places as Archalagan, within any plantation, is quite therapeutic, isn't it?
Well, it's a lovely environment, and I think those who are out there enjoying it on every weekend...
Otherwise you wouldn't get the volunteers, would you?
You wouldn't. Obviously they see a reason for their efforts, and they're coming to the fore now.
Is each site going to have a different theme?
We haven't got the size of woodlands that the UK has got, so we find that we try and cram as much as we can into smaller blocks. Where we can, we'll try and zone it, and that's where we have problems from time to time with conflicts between the likes of cyclists and horse riders and walkers and so forth. But generally speaking, people are very respectful, and we just ask people to share with care.
Is this going to be the major part now at the Forestry Division, developing the amenities of our woodlands?
It's of growing importance, but we still have to manage the woodlands, we still have to plant, we still have to harvest, and we still have to supply our sawmill. So that won't go away, but the foresters are very keen to develop the amenity side as an important core objective.
Now, you're in the useful position of being able to produce the timber that you need. Do you use a lot of that?
We do, and we talked about the volunteers. That's one place where we can help. Where we benefit from their hours of work, we're able to supply some materials. So the raw materials are supplied by us through the planks from the sawmill and a little bit of quarry stone as well.
Graham Watson, very, very enthusiastic about his role as Access and Recreation Officer, making the plantations just available to as many people as he possibly can. And it does seem to be working.
Don't see many kids scaling the trees in the orchards and things nowadays, do you?
It's done on an organised basis now, Simon, which is something different that you and I knew.
We've had many an apple from an irate fellow with an orchard.
Oh, I tell you. We've been in some spots, I can tell you, but I haven't got time here, and I don't think I should anyway.
No, and it's strange, isn't it, the amount of nettles and briars that you got stung with. I mean, we only took one to eat, we didn't... But you had bellyache for a week. That was the worst thing about it.
The phrase I often quote, when I was growing up anyway, and maybe it lasted as long until you were growing up as well, we lived in the age of innocence. There was no real mischief, no vandalism that I ever remembered in our place anyway.
No, not at all.
Manx Radio's Countryside is brought to you by NFU Mutual.
Well, there we are, Simon. That's a full programme put together for this week.
Yes, DEFA Minister there trying to get through and explain as much as he can, I suppose, or dare to do with some of the schemes, if I can put
as much as he wants to.
Yes, and you in the forests there. So out and about as always, and that's the nature of the Countryside programme. That's it for this week. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.